Welcome to the Lighting Your Way podcast. I'm your host, Guardian Nurses founder, Betty Long. During season 3, we'll be delving in deeper to the amazing lives and stories of nurses and other healthcare professionals from around the country. We'll also be talking with a few of my nurse advocate colleagues at Guardian Nurses. You'll get a behind-the-scenes peek at the healthcare system, as well as get advice on how to get the best care when you or a loved one is a patient. We continue our Legends of Nursing series. In this episode, we talk with retired Navy Captain Ginny Beeson, President and CEO of Ginny Beeson and Associates. Ginny had a wonderful career in the Navy as a nurse and as a nursing leader. Her path to the Navy will make you laugh out loud, and her comment about what she learned about leadership in the Navy may alone be worth the listen. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Ginny Beeson, to the Lighting Your Way podcast. I am tickled to be talking with you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Me as well. It's always fun to talk to you, Betty, on any topic.
Right. Well, this, unlike many of our other episodes where we talk about cases and have nurses on the Guardian Nurses team, this is really going to be all about you and your nursing career. Because part of our May celebration of Nurses Month is to talk with who I'm calling the Legends of Nursing. So congratulations for that esteemed honor.
Yeah, it's funny to be called a legend. You know, like you feel like I'm getting reminded these days of my age.
Well, you please trust me. You have more energy than a lot of my friends, so don't discount your energy or your age. Okay. So Ginny, tell me about where you grew up. Tell me about the early days. Where were you born? What did your parents do? Set a stage for me.
I was born in northern New Jersey in a tiny town called Sussex in Sussex County, which is way up in the very tip of New Jersey, about 10 minutes from the Pennsylvania line and 10 minutes from the New York line. Okay. I'm the third of four, the third girl of four kids. The fourth was a boy, to my parents' delight. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, which I attribute a lot of my success to. And my dad was an engineer with Standard Oil of California and traveled a lot. So my mom raised all of us essentially alone as a single mom before that term ever became a popular term. Okay. My dad left on Monday morning. He came back on Friday evening. And my mom raised four kids under the age of 6. There were four of us under the age of 6. I think back on that. Yeah, it's amazing. She recently wrote her biography before she passed away. And there's a thing called Your Significant Achievement. And she said, raising 4 great kids. That was her job. And my dad, as I said, was an engineer and traveled a lot. On the weekend, though, it's funny. We didn't get this until we were older, but on the weekend, my mom would give us to my dad, and she would be gone. My dad would take us out hiking on walks, and we said, "How come Mom never comes?" I'm sure it was because she was ready for a break after all week being with us. Right.
Well, did your father ever admit it, or did he just kind of blow it off?
He was very, very, he knew that she did the lion's share of the work, and he was fun. I mean, but we always just say Dad was fun and Mom was the disciplinarian. I said when I retired from the Navy, I dedicated my whole retirement ceremony and my career to my mom and dad. I said my mom was my first and my best commanding officer.
That's great. That's great. So yeah, and traveling back then, as an engineer, I mean that was that's kind of an arduous. It was not easy to be traveling, or even today, but back then it probably was harder.
It was challenging.
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So Mom was not a nurse, because a lot of our colleagues and the women that I've interviewed have had nurses in the family. Did you have anybody in the family that was a nurse?
My grandmother was a nurse, but I never talked to her about nursing. She had a stroke when I was maybe in 3rd grade. So she was not an influence in terms of nursing. Mm-hmm. This is always an interesting question for me. my inspiration in terms of becoming a nurse. I've wanted to be a nurse my whole life. I don't ever remember not wanting to be a nurse. And so I oftentimes say that, I know that God intended me to be a nurse. I just know that because from as early as I can remember, my favorite book as a young girl was Nurse Nancy. It was a golden book, and it had little bandages in it and adhesive tape. And my mom used to put on one of my dad's white business shirts. I would put it on backwards to make a little white dress. And then she would put a little doily on my head. And I ministered to whoever would pay attention to me, which was usually our family pets.
Wow, good for you. That's an interesting outfit. A doily and a backward shirt for your dad.
Yeah, my dad was a big man. He was 6'4", so I put on one of his white shirts backwards, and that was my first nurse's uniform.
So, were any of your sisters? Did they go into nursing?
No, not one of my sisters is a interior designer, and the other is they're retired now. And my other sister was a social worker for the state of New Jersey. Okay. So no, I was the only medical person in my family.
Wow, that's interesting. In fact, Marcia Davidson, who I had talked with a few weeks back, she was the inspiration for me to become a nurse, and she gave me her Nurse Nancy book. I have that. Yeah, I have that in my office as a reminder. And then another friend gave me a Cherry Ames book. So I have a collection of
read all the Cherry Ames books when I was growing up. I mean, I wanted to be a nurse forever.
Okay, well that's interesting. And even back then there wasn't. I mean, there probably wasn't characters on TV. Right. It was mostly medical shows, and books. So good for you. So tell me a little bit. So you always wanted to be a nurse. So you finished high school, and are you looking at colleges to go for nursing?
Yes. I figured. My dad said early on, you should probably get a degree in nursing. Nursing schools in the 70s, in the late 60s and early 70s were still very prominent. But my dad said, a college education would be a good thing. So I was looking at BSN programs, and I wanted to go. My two older sisters both went to all-girls schools. And one of the things that they said to me, they said, whatever you do, don't go to an all-girls school, go to a co-ed. So my only criteria for schools were I wanted to go to a co-ed program or school rather. And I wanted to go far enough away from home that I would not come home on the weekend, but not so far that I couldn't get home, for holidays and important events. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So that's how you ended up at University of Vermont.
Yeah. I looked at several schools in New England, UMass, URI, UNH, and the campus, when I went to the University of Vermont, it was a gorgeous day. The campus at UVM is beautiful. And when I got there, I said, this is it. This is where I want to go.
Okay, great. Yeah. And to your point, a couple of the gang, like getting a BSN, you're kind of ahead of your time, or your dad was ahead of his time in terms of telling you that. Because a lot of the early nurses just got diploma degrees. All right. So you went to University of Vermont, you get your BSN, and then what happens?
Well, this is an interesting story. When I was in high school, my dad also knew that the military had scholarship programs for nurses. And so he said, I think you should look into a Navy scholarship program. So I did. I went to talk to my guidance counselor, and he said they do have scholarship programs, and they will pay for your college education, your tuition, and you have to pay back 3 years. Now, when I think about that now, I think, wow, what a deal. But I was 17, and I thought 4 years in college and a 3-year payback. I was not wild about joining the military. And so I thought, this is, 7 years. I won't be able to start my life till I'm till I'm 24 years old. So I went home and I said to my dad, Dad, here's the deal. I'm going to have to do a 3-year payback, which is going to make it impossible for me to start my nursing career really until I'm 24. And that seemed like ancient to me. So my dad, who was just such a great guy, said, okay, well, maybe it's not for you. So I went off to the University of Vermont and to my nursing program. And in my sophomore year, the Navy recruiter came on campus and gave a little presentation and said, join the Navy and you'll never have another financial worry. We'll not only pay for your room, your tuition, we'll pay for room and board and books. And I thought, wow. And so at the time, my sister was at the University of Arizona. My brother was at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. I was in Vermont, as you know. And as I said, we're from New Jersey. And I knew that it was a struggle financially for my dad, although he never complained. But I didn't want to join the Navy. I did and put my application in because I thought I wanted to show my dad that I was empathetic to his financial challenges.
Okay.
So I filled out the application very haphazardly. I had to write an essay on leadership when I was 19. I did not like the idea of an essay on leadership, but I hated my European Civ class. So I wrote the essay during my European Civ class. I turned it in. I had to go for an interview in Albany, New York. The interview did not go well. I didn't care because I didn't want to join the Navy anyway. And so I went back after the interview. I went back to the University of Vermont. My interview was in February. In May, in a Friday afternoon nursing theory class, our class was interrupted by a very excited professor that comes bouncing through the door saying, "Excuse me for interrupting class, but we have a very exciting announcement. Ginny Beeson has just been accepted into the United States Navy Nursing Corps." And I was like, oh no. And I even on the way back from Albany to Burlington, I was on a Greyhound bus. I'd never been on a bus in my life. So that was another traumatic experience of the interview. But on the way back, I prayed because I thought, I don't want to do this. And so I prayed, please don't let them take me. This is not what I want to do. And what I said in that prayer was, I want to practice nursing with nurses that love nursing as much as I do. I want to practice in the best hospitals in the world, in the country. I want to travel. I want to meet people. I want to have an exciting career. And so when the announcement was made with my class, I was like, oh no, this is terrible. And all my classmates, as they were clapping, were looking at me thinking, you applied to I told no one. I told no one that I applied. So everybody was looking at me like, when did you do this? Okay. If you remember, this was in 1971. Vietnam was very, very heated at the time. Vietnam, as you know, didn't end until 75. And so the military was extremely unpopular. So that's how I got into the Navy. And so as my mom used to say, you made your bed, now you need to lie in it. I thought, I got myself into this, so I'll go in, I'll spend 3 years and then I'll be done because this is not what I want to do.
So two things. One, you say you tanked the interview. Like, was that purposeful or did you just, you weren't really motivated?
The interview. Interesting. This is another funny thing that happened. Do you remember the hotel rooms that used to have the glass partition above the door that you could like open and shut for ventilation?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Well, I was in a motel room and I was in the same motel where they put a bunch of recruits that were on their way to boot camp the next day. And as many young men before they go to boot camp and relinquish their freedom, they were out drinking and they were noisy and loud and obnoxious. And they sent airplanes they made airplanes with these sayings, come on out for a good time, and they flew them through my window. And so I didn't get any sleep. So when I went for my interview and they said, what do you think you will, contribute to the Navy? I said, I hope I'm going to be a great nurse. I'll, participate for 3 years and then, I'm out of here. And I was terse. I was, I didn't act like I was excited at all or wanted to be accepted. As a matter of fact, one of the interviewers came out afterwards and he said, you seem upset. He said, what's going on? And I said, well, first of all, I didn't get any sleep last night because of the recruits getting ready to go to boot camp and we're carousing and having a great time. And I said, secondarily, this is not really what I mean, I would like the scholarship and I'll go along with what goes with it, but this is not my dream. I mean, it's amazing that they took me.
Right. I was going to say, they're like, oh no, you're coming. We're going to pick you.
It was interesting. It was meant to be. It was meant to be.
Well, when I think about your prayer, like all the things you were asking for, right? That nurses who love nursing, great hospitals, travel, like that sounds like the Navy, right? Like going to.
As a matter of fact, Betty, it's funny you should say that. In my retirement, when you retire from the Navy, it's like a big deal. There's there's speeches, there's side boys. It's like a wedding. There's flowers, there's a band. You walk down the aisle, and in my retirement speech, I said, I know that God heard that prayer on the bus, because as is often the case with prayer, I didn't get anything I asked for and everything I prayed for. I practiced with people that loved it as much as I did in a great, great organization. I traveled, I saw the world, I met great people. It was a fabulous career.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. Like, it's like, whoops, careful what you pray for, right?
Careful what you
right. So you came out of UVM and did you go right into the Navy? Because that was the way to do it. So that was your first nursing job.
Yes, you have to go to Officer Indoctrination School, which is like boot camp, which is another funny story. Another thing that made me believe I had made the wrong decision. You learn how to march. Like, what does it have to do with nursing? You learn how to wear your uniform, which we didn't wear our military uniform. We wore a nurse's uniform. You learned all the military protocol, and I didn't really get what it had to do with nursing. And so boot camp was an interesting experience. That was 8 weeks. And then I reported to my first hospital, which was in New London, Connecticut, on the submarine base.
Oh, okay. Okay. And help me understand. So you're in the Navy and you are getting paid, right? So what does a nurse in the Navy in those age, the age of 1972, 71?
1973. I joined in 71 when I was a sophomore in college, and then they paid for my last 2 years, and then it's still a 3-year payback. So I headed to New London, Connecticut in August of 73. I graduated in May. I went to boot camp for 2 months, and then I went to New London. And it's interesting you should ask about pay. I looked up the military pay chart for 1973, and what I calculated was I made about $10,000, and I thought that can't be right.
Why?
But
why?
Well, I went online. Average nursing salary in 1970 was about $7,000.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe that. But our salary as a young nurse, my starting salary was $9,600.
Wow. Wow. Oh, God. Now, plus, and you had to live on base at that point?
No, you didn't. You had to live on base initially. They wanted you to, I think, live on base just to get used to the, some of the military protocols and such. But once you had spent this, and I think it was like maybe 6 months in a BOQ, which is a bachelor's officer's quarters, then you could move out on the economy, is what we say. And so once I spent my 6 months in the BOQ, 2 nurses and I moved out and rented a house in Mystic, Connecticut.
Okay. So you were, you think you're doing 3 years and then you're going to get out. But it turns out you didn't do that because you spent your career in the Navy. Right.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, that you had a lot of roles, right? Obviously you were a staff nurse at the hospital. Tell me about your different roles.
Right. Well, what happened in New London, I said in New London, 3 years and I'm out of here. This is not what I want to do. And then at the end of the 3 years, I thought, you can't say, I was from New Jersey, as I said, you can't say I joined the Navy and I went to Connecticut. So I thought I have to go someplace else. I have to have another tour. So I decided to go. My second tour was in Pensacola. And then when I was getting ready to get out from Pensacola, all my friends said, you have to go overseas. Like, overseas is what's the most fun. You have to go overseas. So I went from Pensacola to Iceland. And then in Iceland, which was very fun, you can't look for a job from overseas. So I thought I'll go back to, I'll go back to Charleston. I went to Charleston next, and you have to stay 1 year before you can get out. You have to, once you return from overseas or take a new set of orders, you have to stay at least 1 year before getting out. So at 1 year, I went and I started doing interviews, actually in Boston. That's where I wanted to go. And I was at Mass General talking to the recruiter, and she said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I want to have a job here. And she said, no, you don't. She said, when you talk about the Navy, your face lights up. You talk about how much you love it. She said, you don't want to get out of the Navy. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to get out of the Navy. So that's how
so much for a recruiter.
Right. Well, she was a great recruiter because she could see that it wasn't right for me. But anyway, in those jobs, those first jobs were staff. My first job in Connecticut was a staff nurse. When I got to Pensacola, I was given a nurse manager job. And then from then on, I was in middle management for several years as a nurse manager. And then I moved I did the standard, promotional path for a nurse. Went from staff nurse to nurse manager to director to chief nurse. So my nursing career was pretty standard in terms of the career path for nurses that love nursing and want to stay in.
Tell me about the role in Iceland. First of all, I didn't even know we had a base in Iceland, nor a hospital, a Navy base. Like, what was that like?
Well, there's not a base there now. I was there in 1980. And if you remember, in 1980, we were still involved very much in the Cold War. And there is a small strait of water between Iceland and Europe, England primarily. And the base monitored activity at sea in that little strait, because there would be Russian submarines and Russian planes that would be able to access the United States through that small area. Wow. And so if there was Russian activity in the area in terms of either a submarine or an airplane, there was very few ships, then what they would do is scramble the pilots, who would then, launch and monitor, escort the plane or the submarine out of the area. Of course, notify the United States that there was activity. So it's pretty much a Cold War operation that's now closed. But so there needed to be a medical facility to support. It was mostly Air Force, interestingly enough, 60% Air Force and 40% Navy. But the military, the medical facility was Navy. So it was a small hospital. We mostly did outpatient, because in order to go to Iceland, you had to screen medically and you had to have zero medical problems. So we delivered babies. We took care of a lot of sprains and fractures from ice and snow. And, did a lot of, viral diseases and, things like that. It was actually my easiest job because everybody was healthy.
Right.
And,
and how long did you stay in Iceland?
I was there for 18 months. It was a shortened overseas tour because it was called a hardship tour. But I'll tell you what, I loved Iceland. It's a beautiful country. It has beautiful people, and I loved it there. It was very fun. That recruiting joke for Iceland is, come to Iceland, there's a girl behind every tree. There are no trees in Iceland at all. There were very few women on the base. So as a young 29-year-old, it was very, very fun. On a base with mostly guys. It was very, very fun. But the Icelandic people are just the most warmest, most generous, most hospitable people. I met a lot of people as we traveled around the island and saw fabulous sights and waterfalls and geysers. And it's just a beautiful country.
Have you been back since you were there?
Yes, I did go back. I went back 2 years right before the pandemic, thankfully. And it's changed a lot, like everything. But it's still beautiful. And the Northern Lights are like nothing you have ever seen before. Here we see Northern Lights that are yellow and green and some purple. Up there you see purple, red, orange, scarlet. it's fabulous. It was a wonderful tour.
That's great. So you mentioned that your career path took the kind of the normal, nurse manager, director, and then you became chief nurse executive, right? But what I know about your career is that there were oftentimes, because of, I guess, assignments or what would you call, I guess, assignments, right? Duties or whatever, that you are in these roles maybe 3 years. You don't see that a lot in chief nurse executive roles in lay hospitals, right? Non-military hospitals. How did that impact your, I want to say, effectiveness, or, okay, here's, Captain Beeson, she's our new chief nurse executive, and she'll be here for 3 years. Could you have extended that, or was that mostly military? Like, okay, you're here for 3 years.
You can extend, if you love a place, you can extend for 1 year. I loved Connecticut, so I stayed there actually 4 years, trying to decide whether I was going to stay in the Navy or not. So you can extend, but it's not normal to extend. And a couple of my tours that were unusual. One of my tour, I was an assignment officer, called a detailer, and I was at the Bureau of Personnel, so it was outside the hospital, and I assigned Navy nurses around the country and around the world. That was one unusual assignment. And then another assignment that I had was out of the hospital, was at the Navy School of Health Sciences, where I was teaching in the Navy Medical Department's leadership department, which was very, very fun, and how I got into my love of public speaking and training that I used when I retired. Okay. But when you go from hospital to hospital, it is unusual to be able to extend, because the normal routine for military people in the medical department is to just keep moving around. And the challenge for that is, of course, getting used to a new hospital and a new set of friends. But what makes the military unique, and I think the civilian world could learn from this, we talk about in the civilian world, the healthcare system. We don't have a system in healthcare in the United States. We have several siloed organizations that work basically the same, but with drastically different policies and procedures. And in the military, it is a system. So when I went from Connecticut to Pensacola, the same paperwork, the same computers, the same rules and regulations, the same hierarchy, the same HR, everything is the same. So although you have to get used to a new location, you don't have to get used to a new system. The system is exactly the same.
Okay.
And,
I get it. Yep.
And that makes it a lot easier to move from place to place to place. The challenge is you have to get there, establish your reputation, and then, work and make a difference. And then just when you feel like you're getting the hang of things and, making some real changes, you move.
Right.
And,
go ahead.
That has both good and bad. There's good and bad about that, but it certainly does make for an exciting career.
Do you get to pick, and I'm sorry if I'm naive about this, but do you get to pick, so that maybe the time's coming up, can you select where you want to go next? Is it based on openings, or do they just assign you where they need you?
Well, and that is what the assignment officer does. That's what my job was. And that's a really good question. You put in what you call your dream sheet. And on your dream sheet is what you want to do. You get 3 choices. And the Navy tries to match you with what you want to do, because we want people to stay. We want you to stay in the Navy, particularly if you're a good officer. But the bottom line is you're going to go where the Navy wants you to go. So the triad of detailing, when I was an assignment officer, it's needs of the Navy first. And then the second criteria is what is best for your career. And then the third criteria is what do you want to do? Because oftentimes what nurses would want to do wasn't what's best for their career. Right. So they were very interested in grooming you to be a good naval officer and to contribute into the future. So that's called the triad of detailing. So I do believe in, having been an assignment officer, you do want to make people happy because you want them to stay. But
Right.
the bottom line is, if there are nurses that are needed in Diego Garcia, and you have the right rotation date and you meet the qualifications, you're going to go.
Okay.
But the bottom line is, and in most cases, we tried to meet what people wanted. As a matter of fact, when I became a detailer, once I left, and I would run into people and they said, "Oh, you were my detailer." My first question was like, "Were you happy with what I did? Did I treat you well?" Because sometimes everybody, of course, wanted to go to Hawaii, London.
Right. Right.
Nobody wanted to go to Great Lakes, which is north of Chicago and freezing cold. Nobody wanted to go to Diego Garcia or to Guam. Nobody wanted to go to Iceland, interestingly enough, and it was a fabulous place to be stationed. So it's the needs of the Navy are always the bottom line, always.
Okay. Okay. So Ginny, you and I have had a lot of conversations on leadership, and that's in fact how we met many years ago when you came to talk to our Sapono conference, Southeastern Pennsylvania Organization of Nurse Leaders, on leadership. And so I know we've had many energized and fun conversations about that. But in the Navy, what did you learn about leadership?
In the Navy, I learned early on that nursing is a leadership job. It's a leadership job. And they stress that in boot camp, in officer indoctrination school. They tell you right off the bat that you are a leader. And as a matter of fact, this is another reason why I didn't like boot camp. They said, you are a naval officer and leader first, and you're a nurse second. And I was passionate about nursing. I had just graduated from my program, and I did not like being told that I was a nurse second. Okay. So in my head, I said, I am not a nurse second. I'm a nurse first. I'll always be a nurse first forever. And one day I went to my company officer and I told him I was not happy. And he said, "Oh, I know that." And I said, you keep telling me that I'm a naval officer and a leader first and a nurse second. I said, I'm not going to go into leadership. I'm going to be a really good nurse, but I'm not going to go into leadership. I mean, I was 21 now. And he said, he was so wise. I'll always remember this conversation. He said, "Oh, okay. All right. So let me understand this." Then I knew I was in trouble. He said, "So you are going to go and be a nurse." He said, "You're going to New London, right?" I said, "Right." He said, "And you're going to be supervising and working with a bunch of corpsmen." Corpsman is our equivalent of the nursing assistant or the patient care technician. And he said, "And you're going to be you're going to be teaching them and helping them and instructing them." He said, "You're going to be responsible for the care of a lot of, ill people that are going to be relying on you to make wise decisions and to practice critical thinking. And you're going to be working with, families of sick people. And pretty soon you'll be on nights." He said, "You'll be the only person on nights. So you'll be in charge of everything, and everyone will be coming to you for, answers, solutions." And he said, "And you'll be promoted, I imagine, if you do a good job, and you'll get more and more responsibility that's going to require all kinds of critical thinking." He says, "You don't think of that as a leadership job?" And of course, then I'm thinking like, okay, I get it. But they drill that into your head that you're an officer and leader first and you're a nurse second. And at about 10 years later, when I ran into one of my colleagues that I was in boot camp with me, she said, "Ginny, remember how much trouble you were having at boot camp about, being an officer at first and a nurse second?" She said, "How do you feel about that now?" She said, "If you were asked today, are you a naval officer first or are you a nurse first? How would you answer that?" And I said, "I would answer that by saying yes." Because I couldn't separate them anymore. Nursing is a leadership job, and I don't think we enforce that enough at the get-go. I mean, the decisions that you're making as a nurse from the very beginning are leadership decisions.
Well, did you learn that at University of Vermont? Like, what was the curriculum like? Because
I didn't learn that. I did not learn that. I mean, our focus was clinical, and we had, clinical rotations and all different specialties, and UVM prepared me really, really well, but we didn't get taught in the, from 69 to 73 when I was in college. We did not get taught that nursing is a leadership job. And I believe that so strongly. And the other thing I believe, and we've talked about this too, it is a team sport.
Right.
Nursing is a team sport. If you don't get that, then you're not in the right profession.
Right.
So, I, in my teaching and consulting now, I am drilling home that nursing is a leadership job. It's a leadership job. It's a leadership job.
Right. I particularly now because, and a team sport too, because, the hospital experience is much different than it was when you were a staff nurse, regardless of whether you were in the Navy or in a civilian hospital. It's a tough job, just as it was back then. And the level of knowledge that the nurses need to have now, right? They have to rely on the resident, the pharmacist, the physical therapist, whatever. I would agree. So you left the Navy in 2003?
I did. Right? In the Navy, if you don't make admiral in 30 years, then you have to get out. And so I had.
They do. They finally kick you out after all those times of trying to keep you. Okay.
They do. At 30, you're finished. And so I retired, and as the chief nurse, I was the chief nurse at Bethesda. Navy now is Walter Reed. It was Navy Hospital Bethesda at the time, which was our flagship. It was a great place to retire from. Yeah. And I was only 50 when I retired, so wow. I had a lot more in me.
Right. So you connected with the advisory board, and
I did.
What was your role with them?
I was the advisory board at the time had leadership academies. They had a physician leadership academy, a nursing leadership academy, and a healthcare leadership academy. And I was an instructor in the nursing leadership academy, which I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, because just based on your career and the passion that you bring to the topic of leadership, I think you probably were you found your spot.
Yeah, it was great. I worked there for 8 years.
8 years. Did you travel much when you were at the advisory board?
Yes, it was a traveling job. You traveled and, to wherever the need was, and you taught their classes were 4 hours, and you taught for 4 hours, and then you flew to the next city.
Oh, okay.
There was a lot of travel. That's one of the reasons that I decided to leave the advisory board and go on my own. Was the travel was it was a lot of travel, and it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So it was stressful travel. Finish the day, get to the airport. Get to sometimes your hotel room at midnight, teach the next day. I loved the job, but it was it was a lot of travel.
Right. So let me, a couple more questions. I want to talk about your career. When you look back on it, you've mentioned a couple of folks that have impacted your career, but is there anybody that stands out really as your mentor?
Not in the Navy. And I had a lot of mentors in the Navy. The other good thing about the military is that when you do, because moving is stressful and you go from duty station to duty station, when you got to a new place, you assigned like a buddy, like a big sister, big brother, that helped you get to know the hospital and where things were and how to navigate things. Those people, interestingly, although they were wonderful, didn't become my mentors, but people throughout the Navy who I admired. Admiral Dirk was the first Nurse Corps admiral that in the Navy. She was made an admiral in 1973, and I heard her talk about nursing and the role of nurse leaders in the military healthcare system. So she was somebody that I really looked up to. But I had different mentors in every stage of my career that were wonderful, wonderful people. I did have a strong mentor when I left the advisory board and started my own business doing teaching and consulting. I had a great mentor, Sharon Cox, who was on the speaking, so she's still on the speaking circuit, has been for a long time. She became my mentor as I started my own business, and has, is still today one of my very best friends and mentors. But in the military, I had many, many mentors.
Okay. All right. Great. And does Sharon know that she's had that impact on you? Have you had a chance to tell her?
Oh, I tell her all the time. I tell her all the time. Zoom, even today we Zoom once a month and talk about nursing issues and challenges. She helped me so much. And one of the things that I'm most amazed at her is one of the things I think we don't do well in nursing is share stuff. I mean, when I first started, she sent me her PowerPoints. She sent me her nursing. She had a kind of a boot camp type course for nursing. She sent me the whole curriculum.
Wow.
Not for me to take it, although she didn't say don't take it. She said, here's what I do. Take
Okay.
this and make it your own. She shared everything.
That's great.
It was
great.
wonderful.
Oh, that's great. So, all right. So, here's a fun question. Hopefully, if you could speak, you were the graduating speaker. I'm sorry, you're the commencement speaker for all the graduating BSNs in the country this May. What would you say?
I believe that nursing in the next several years is going to be very, very challenging because the pandemic has had a devastating effect on nursing. So I think that the nursing shortage that, as you know, Betty, we've talked about this too in our careers in nursing, the shortage has been a constant challenge for us. And the pandemic has certainly dealt a severe blow. So it's going to be a very, very, very challenging time. But with that challenging time comes tremendous opportunity. And so I would say to new nurses, here's what I want you to remember. Number one is this. It's always and only about the patient. It has to be always and only about patient care, patient care, patient care. I think that also over the years, it sounds weird to say this, but I think we've moved the patient out of the center.
Mm-hmm.
And as healthcare has become more of a business, the patient always has to be number one. And that needs to be topmost in everybody's mind. But I would say secondarily, I would say nursing is a leadership job and a team sport. And you need to clearly understand that. Most especially as a young nurse, I want you to know that nursing is a team sport. We need to take care of each other, support each other, be kind to each other, because also right now, before the pandemic, there was a horrible problem with bullying in nursing. With all disasters, I believe that nurses come together. And I do believe that the pandemic has helped to decrease some of that bullying because nurses have had to come together and support each other. So I would say number two, it's a team sport. Take care of each other. Take care of your patients, most importantly, and take care of each other secondarily, an importance to me. And then I want to say be bold and courageous, because now is the time in nursing for us to really clearly say what nurses need to do and what nurses don't need to do. I think we're doing a lot of things in nursing now that we've done because we've always done them. I believe that there's so many things that can be changed in nursing. Having come from the military world, corpsmen, who are our patient care technician equivalents, they do so many things that in the civilian world nurses must do. Like they start IVs, they pass NGs, they put Foleys in. And people would, say, you can't have a nurse's aide do that. But all of those things, if you think about them, Betty, those are technical skills.
Right.
Putting in a Foley is a technical skill, as is starting an IV. It doesn't require any leadership or critical thinking. You have to learn to task. But I want nurses to do the things that nurses need to do, like figuring out, triaging, who gets seen first, what is a complicated patient picture, what is that telling us? What do we need to do? What do we need to watch for? I want us to do what nurses only can do and work with other team members that are every bit as important, the nurses' aides, the patient care technicians, the physicians, the residents, to really provide outstanding care. And that's another great thing about the military. In the military, it is a team. The doctors are on the team. In many cases, the nurses outrank the doctor. And there's not the nurse-doctor hierarchy that there is in the civilian world. Doctors are very much on the team, as are the corpsmen. We say the best thing about Navy nursing is Navy corpsmen. I mean, there's such great assets to the team, and they do phenomenal things. So I would like us to be bold and courageous and take a stand on things that are important. And what does nursing need to do? The other thing I think is that we've gotten into nursing computers, and we're doing a lot of meeting rules and regulations that don't have anything to do with patient care and have everything to do with meeting requirements on a check sheet. And the interesting thing about the pandemic is that because nurses have been so short-staffed without enough time, a lot of those things that they have deemed as not important, they haven't done.
Right.
And
nothing has happened, right? The world hasn't collapsed.
The world has gone on. And so I think that what we need to do is say, in the past 2 years, we did not do this particular thing on the check sheet, and nothing happened bad. So I think that now is our time to really do some, and this is what nurses can do that the care technicians can't do. What are those critical nurse functions that have gone by the wayside in pandemic that can continue to go by the wayside? And how do we professionally and respectfully present our case to the leadership in the hospitals and say, we need to change how we're doing business. We must change how we're doing business.
Ginny, you still got it.
I don't know whether that's true. I feel like now is our time. Now is our time. But we can't, and here's the other thing I believe, we can't do it angrily. We can't be mad, and we can't be upset. I mean, I know it's hard to keep the emotion out, but I want us to respectfully and professionally present our case calmly and intelligently, because when we get all exercise, in Crucial Conversations and Crucial Confrontations are two of my favorite books. And Crucial Confrontations is a book that says again and again, keep the emotion out, keep the emotion out, keep the emotion out, and calmly present your case. So those would be my words of wisdom to new grads.
Well, they would all be lucky to hear from you. Trust me. She's still really, I mean, seriously, the passion that you have for nursing is just wonderful. Right. And I am glad that your career path took the turn it did. And I'm certainly glad that you and I met because I am too. Yeah, I echo much of your comments. All right. So this is a fun question. I don't even know if I've ever asked you this. Have you ever attended in person the Army Navy game?
I have not. That's on my bucket list. It's funny you should say that. I have never gone to an Army Navy game, but my friends who have gone have had such a good time. I have been to several games at the Academy, and it is there. They march on. Whenever there's a touchdown, they go down to the goal line, and they do that little get down on their knees and raise their hands up and down. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance. You don't get, at the end of the Army Navy game is when the midshipmen and the cadets, they sing to each other, their alma mater. It's very, very moving. And, that's just another thing I just want to say about the military. The camaraderie in the military is amazing. And there's a lot of inter-service rivalry, Army versus Navy in particular. But the bottom line is we all know that we're doing the same thing, which is taking care of men and women that put their lives on the line for our country every single day. And that unifying purpose is another thing that I think is a huge strength in the military. When you ask a military nurse, what is the purpose of your job? It is to take care of these men and women that put their lives on the line every day.
Right. And, it's a pretty powerful mission.
It is. It really, and when you see them and take care of them, it just renews your whole dedication to the profession of military nursing.
All right. Yeah, I just wondered if it was just as much fun as it looks on the TV when they're. I think it's pretty cool, and certainly, I mean, it's been in Philadelphia for such a long time. So hopefully you'll get to go. You can't score a ticket
we'll
somewhere.
Together. You can come with me.
Okay. All right. I'm in. I'm in. It's usually in December, right? It's like the first weekend in December.
Yes. I
think. Yeah, one of the coldest days. Usually
one of the coldest days of the year. Right.
Yeah.
But we'll take a little flask.
Okay. All right. Great. Good idea. I would love that. That would be really fun. That's great that it's on your bucket list. I hope that we can score.
I've never done it. My friends who have done it have said it's just so much fun.
Well, it looks like a lot of fun. So that would be good. I'd be happy to do that with you. Ginny, thank you for taking the time. I love our conversations, and this was no different. So thank you. Appreciate all that you've done, and thank you for your career.
Well, thank you too, Betty. As you know, we're members of the Mutual Admiration Society. You've done so much for nursing as well, and it's always a delight to spend time with you.
Well, thank you. All right. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll tune in next week when we continue our Legends of Nursing series. As it is the month of May, I would like to wish all of my nursing colleagues and friends a very happy Nurses Month. May you be acknowledged and appreciated for who you are and what you do. Thank you for joining us this week. You can find the Lighting Your Way podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google, YouTube, Spotify, and Stitcher. If you liked what you heard, tell a friend and leave us a review. You can learn all about Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates on our website, guardiannurses.com. So until next time, find some joy in your life, pet all the good doggies and kitties, and remember to tell your people that you love them. Take care.